What's up, the podcast people? Welcome back to Questions You Never Thought to Ask, the Whitewater Kayaking podcast. My name is Seth Ashworth. I've got a fun topic lined up for you this week. But first, I just wanted to give a big shout out to the people who support my podcast on Patreon, patreon.com/Seth Ashworth. Patreon is a crowdfunding platform where you can chip in a couple of bucks every month to help this podcast stay alive and stay on the road and keep going. So big shout out to those people who support it. And if you're interested in helping to keep this podcast alive, and then you can go check that out, patreon.com/Seth Ashworth. Anyway, this week I've got a fun but somewhat monologue-y topic I want to discuss with you, and it's somewhat monologue-y just because I didn't manage to schedule someone to come talk with me about this subject. But what I'm going to talk about is bouncing back from a poor competition result or a string of results, and I'm going to use a bit of a personal anecdote here to preface what I have to say on this topic, because it seems like it's seasonal. You know, it's summer, race season's coming around, Colorado Tour is happening right now. We just finished a bunch of spring races here in Canada. There's a bunch more things going on through the summer and around where you are, I'm sure. So I'm going to start this podcast by telling a little bit of a personal anecdote, and then give some of my kind of 2 cents on this topic. So last month in May 2019, UNLEASHEDxQuebec happened, which is a multi-stage whitewater event. In my opinion, one of the best whitewater events in kayaking. About 25 athletes from all over the world compete across 4 separate stages to try and figure out who's the best overall kayaker. 2 of the stages are freestyle, 2 of the stages are races. Generally, because of spring in this part of the world, you never really know exactly where you're going to be from one day to another, and you don't have much practice time on any particular race course or any particular feature, which makes it very exciting, and you kind of have to adapt and change very quickly. This year was my 3rd year racing and competing at an Unleashed event. I did the first one here in Canada 3 years ago, and the one in Uganda 2 years ago, I guess, 2018. So I know exactly the style of the event. I understand the stresses and strains that it puts on a group of people, and I get it. And previous years I've done pretty well. Like the first year I was 8th or something overall out of 25 men, and the one in Uganda I was like 11th or 12th, I think, out of 25. So I was kind of shooting for that middle of the pack, like ideally top 10 result here, and I didn't achieve that this year. And I'm going to break it down step by step, what went wrong and what I would do differently, knowing what I know now. So just to give you a bit of a run through, 4 stages. Stage 1 was a biggest trick freestyle competition at a wave called All You Can Eat Ribs on the Ottawa River, but in a new location. We'd only been there one time before. Stage 2 was a boatacross race on the Rouge River, which I've raced at a couple of times. It's really fun. It's like a huge, fairly short, like 3/4 of a mile, big wave train, some big holes. Not super challenging line, but super challenging to be really smooth, and super challenging with like 5 other people all around you. Stage 3 was a freestyle best ride competition at this wave called White Dog on the Rouge, where I've never surfed before. And then stage 4 was a giant slalom on this run called Basse Cachée, which is near Quebec City. Really sick piece of whitewater. Let's break it down step by step, what happened at each event. So stage 1, that biggest trick competition. Basically, you have 2 hours on this wave to try and get as many rides as you can, and you're scored on your top 3 tricks. And then each trick obviously has a points value, kind of similar to ICF, except there's more tricks on the score sheet, and there's a couple of other bonuses you can get if your trick's really like kind of steezy and sick. it's, in my opinion, it's one of the most exciting ways to see a freestyle competition, because you just see people going as hard out as they can. There's no one being conservative, no one's holding back, they're just going out super hard. I didn't feel that good in my boat when we arrived at this competition. Like, I only just got my new boat probably 3 days before the competition started, or 2 days before the competition started. So I hadn't really had enough time in my boat to really feel like settled into it and adjusted. Unfortunately, there was nothing I could do about that. Like, I received my new boat a week, like literally just a few days before the event, and there was nothing I could do to change it. So anyway, through the day, didn't feel that good in my boat. Definitely wasn't performing at my peak capacity. I didn't feel at any point like my wave awareness of how the wave was shaping and changing was on like really sharp, and I didn't feel like, I just generally didn't feel like I had enough time in my freestyle boat in the run up to the competition. And I think I finished the day somewhere in the lower middle of the pack, like in the 15, 16, 17 type end of the ladder. Not an ideal start to a competition where your points are combined over all 4 stages. So you need to do well across the board if you want to continue and have a good result. Stage 2, motocross. I actually did better than I thought I was going to in this event. I had a really stacked first heat with like Dane and Andy Brunner, who are really fast, and I had Andrew Oxley and Arthur Pollux, who are like veterans of this competition as well. So I was pretty concerned going into the first round I was going to get knocked out pretty much right away, and I just somehow managed to pull it all together, which was really great, and I felt pretty good in my boat. I narrowly missed getting into the finals round just by about half a boat length. Josh Collins from West Virginia managed to just get to the banner right before me, which is not a big deal. Like, that's the way it goes down. I'm not upset about it. It is what it is. But I was happy to kind of pull it together somewhat there, or at least keep it together. Not the like top 5 result I needed to really balance out my last stage 1 result, but not that bad either. That put us into another competition immediately the next day, stage 3, White Dog. White Dog's a wave on the Rouge. Honestly, I'd never paddled there before. I never thought we'd have a competition there. It's not the biggest wave, and it's definitely not my favorite style of wave. It's more... how's the best way to describe it? It's not as kind of steep and vertical as waves I would normally choose to surf, and you definitely have to drive your boat out and generate a lot of your own momentum, which is not something I do very often and not something I practice doing very often, which is totally my fault, and I should be better at that. And the whole purpose of the competition is to find the best all-round kayaker, and if you can't do everything well, then that's on you. So anyway, kind of getting off on a side tangent here, but I hadn't done any practice of this wave at all. I never thought we would have a competition there because it's not particularly big, it's not particularly steep, it's not particularly scary. So that meant I had done 0 practice for my best ride, and the goal here was to have everyone had 5 rides and your best 2 rides counted. So you didn't have that many throwaway rides, and you had to be somewhat consistent over 2 rides, which I wasn't super pumped about. And to be honest, I never thrive in the competition atmosphere where nobody's really scared and nobody's really concerned about anything. It definitely doesn't get me going at all. And so when I showed up to that competition, it was just like I had no preparation. I didn't even know what the wave looked like, you know. So I stood there and I watched some people ride for a bit, and I kind of thought I had it dialed in, and when it came down to it, when I had my 5 rides, I just did not have it dialed in at all, and I was dead last at the end of stage 3, which didn't put me that well going into stage 4, but, you know, brush it off, stand up, move on. Stage 4, we arrived at Basse-Cachée, which is this river just outside of Quebec City. Really fun. We did a race here 2 years ago that was really high quality. Everyone was scared. The slalom was fun. There's some big moves, some big holes you want to avoid. And when we arrived at Basse-Cachée this time, the flow was like way less than half probably when we raced 2 years ago. And to be honest, I assumed we weren't going to race at all. It just wasn't like, there wasn't like a real feeling of scared in the air where everyone was just like kind of bricking it, and the course was challenging. They made the event organizer did really well to make the gates a lot more difficult because the white water wasn't as hard. But again, like if I had showed up there to paddle not in a competition, I think I would have gone to paddle somewhere else because the level was just like super, super low. But still fun. I had a really good motocross day 2 days before, so I was pretty pumped about racing some creeking. Practice lap went really great, but run 1 just wasn't super smooth. Wasn't bad, like I made all the gates, which not everyone did, but wasn't super fast. Got back to the top. Run 2, so you get 2 runs, 1 counts. Run 2, everything was going really smooth up until this kind of like crux double drop move about 2/3 of the way through the course. I was really flying. Everything else had gone well. I hadn't touched any rocks. My bow was nice and dry. I was going super fast. Like I could feel I was going fast, which I was pumped about. Unfortunately, on that crux double drop, I just didn't get like a strong enough left stroke to come out of it and into the eddy. And then kind of everything went wrong, and I got pushed past gate 2 into gate 3, and it was all game over from there, which is pretty distressing because I was having a really good run, and that left me finishing again like lower middle, like 17th, 18th or something. And overall, that put me in an overall position that I didn't want to be in. It was much lower than I wanted to be. And I was pretty unhappy actually, like leaving that competition. I just hadn't paddled my best at any point. And I was beat down. I was annoyed. So let's break it down for a second and figure out why did that happen and what would I do differently next time. So why did that happen? The main underlying story really is that I was completely underprepared. I spent too much time in Eastern Canada, like through February and March, not really kayaking at all. And I had to spend the time here because it's important I get enough days for my Canadian citizenship application, which is like the next step on from having a permanent residency card, which is what I have now. So it was important that I spent the time here in Canada, but my original plan was to be kayaking somewhere maybe out west or on Vancouver Island. Unfortunately, when I came back from Ecuador, that just wasn't the right option for me. There wasn't enough water there. They were having like a particularly dry winter. I didn't have that much money in the bank. So it was kind of like a whole thing. I ended up not kayaking as much as I should have done. And although I was doing a bunch of physical training and preparation by doing some running, some weights, some cross-country skiing through the winter, a lot of shoveling snow, all that physical activity is really not the same as having time in your boat at all. And my lack of time in my boat through that like 9-week period not just showed, but I could feel it. And I could feel my boat just like lagging and my body just lagging behind what my mind was saying for my boat to do, you know? So I think in the future, going into this competition, I'll be a lot better prepared. There's no way I will just do weights and running and physical activity without as much kayaking as I can get in that time. And I think even we did get a bit of kayaking in that time, but it wasn't like ideal preparation. It was laps down the frozen Ottawa River. You know, you spend more time wading through the snow to get there and to get out of the river than you do actually kayaking. And your time on the river is so cold, you're mostly just trying not to get the water to hit you in the face. So probably I won't spend it, or I will try and make an effort to travel more and be more prepared going into competition season next spring, because definitely wasn't ideal this year. So what's the moral of the story here? The moral of the story here, really, in my opinion, is it's absolutely okay to make mistakes as long as you learn from them. And that's not just the case with this competition, that's the case, I think, in life, but especially since this is what we're talking about. Here I made a mistake that I didn't train enough, I didn't prepare enough, I didn't have enough time in my boat. Next year I'm going to make more of an effort to be in my boat more and more in the lead up in a more structured way that sets me up to succeed better. So that's the mistake, was not being prepared. What I learned is I need to prepare better and make more of an effort to be in a place which is accelerating that preparation. I think a lot of people, and we're going to talk more generally now, but I think a lot of people just get hung up in that negative result or that bad result, that one bad result or that string of bad results, and it just kind of tailspins them into a downward spiral they can't get out of. And I've seen this happen to a bunch of people where they just have a couple of bad competition days and then they can't get started again. And I think that's really just not enough people are saying, I learned a lesson, but now I'm going to move forwards. Moving forwards is kind of the only thing you can do, in my opinion, and that's, here I've learned a lesson, I'm shaking it off and I'm moving on. It's not a big deal because I've learned a lesson. So if this is happening to you, and if you feel like you're in a tailspin because you had a couple of bad days out there, just think about why, take a step back, stop for a moment, think about what you can learn and how you can move on, right? Like, it's okay to make mistakes as long as you can figure out what the lesson is. And if you can't figure out what the lesson is, maybe you need to have a harder look at what the mistake was in the first place, or what the root cause of that mistake was. And it's okay to talk to people about it too, right? Like, if you need to, just call one of your friends and be like, this is what's happening, this is the outcome, I can't figure out what I should have improved. And that's kind of a mindset that I think not enough people approach kayaking with, is like, it's easy to focus on the things you did wrong. It's easy for your mind to get locked on to those negative experiences, like those swims or the times you got rescued or whatever. And it's easy to forget all those really good experiences you had, where you were like successful on a line or successful on a rapid or successfully learned a trick or whatever it is. It's really easy to forget those really good times that you worked hard for, and really easy to like stay locked on to those bad memories where you did something wrong or there was a bad outcome. And I think it's important for us as kayakers to not let those few bad negative times crowd out the good times that we're working towards to improve and to be better kayakers all the time. So I guess the moral of the story is just, keep your chin up, keep moving forward. It's okay. It's okay to make mistakes as long as you're learning from them. What I want to finish this podcast by saying is, think about when the last time you made a big mistake was, and then I want you to think about why, and then I want you to go on a piece of paper at home. I want you to write down your phone if you don't use paper anymore. If you don't use paper anymore, good for you. Write down what that mistake was and what you learned from it, and then what you're going to do differently next time. And I want you to try and make sure you don't make that mistake again. I'm going to try and make sure I don't make the same mistakes I made this spring, next spring. And yeah, I think we're going to just kind of wrap it up there. That's pretty much all I have to say this week. I apologize that this week has been somewhat monologue-y and somewhat one-tone and somewhat you just listening to me drawl on. But I appreciate you sticking with it. If this was interesting for you, let me know. Hopefully back to more regularly off-topic, on-topic kayak podcasting in a couple of weeks' time. And I will see you then. Peace.